Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to this Kendall Hunt webinar, Cultivating a Sense of Belonging, Supporting Students to Develop Their Academic Self-Concepts. So what roles exactly do belonging and self-concept play in the student success and retention equation? Well, the short answer is they play very, very crucial roles. And so how exactly do you foster these aspects in your class and your first year experience course? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And so before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping points. This webinar is being recorded. You'll receive access to that in the coming days. At the end of the webinar, we will be having a question answer session that you can throw in your questions to either the chat or the Q&A function. So if you have a question during the webinar, feel free to throw that in at any time, and we will address those afterwards. But before I give the floor to our esteemed speakers today, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce them, make sure that they're getting the love that they deserve. Dr. Lori Hazard is an education expert with over 30 years of experience helping students succeed in college. She has won numerous national awards for her work with first-year students, and she's been featured in Washington Post, 17 Magazine, and more. As former assistant dean for student success and the author of many books like Foundations for Learning, and then also Habits of Mind for Success in College, Claiming Your Education with us, Kendall Hunt. She brings groundbreaking insights on student transitions, parent involvement, and creating thriving college experiences from orientation through to graduation. Her core author, Stephanie Carter, is with us today as well, and she is the Director of Tutoring and Writing Centers at the Community College of Rhode Island and a leader in student success with over 25 years of experience as well. She specializes in helping first-year students and families navigate the transition from high school to college, and she's worked in classrooms, residence halls, learning centers. So Stephanie really combines scholarly experience, practical knowledge, and she creates supportive environments where students can both thrive academically and personally. So I don't know about you guys, I am pretty darn excited. So without further ado, Lori, Stephanie, it's yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
So we are really excited today to be here and talking with everyone about belonging and academic self-concept. Lori, did you want to say anything else before we dive in?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a little bit about my background. My background's in personality psychology, and for most of my career, I've been studying achievement motivation, what creates the need to achieve. For students, and really that question of what creates success in individuals. And we know that the personality traits, habits, attitudes, mindsets, and behaviors that create success in the college classroom also cross over other domains like career, if you're a musician, if you're an athlete. And we know, for example, that sense of belonging and having a strong positive self-concept can contribute to academic achievement and success in the classroom. So I'm excited to dive into it as it relates particularly to student success and that first year experience for students.
Great. Well, I will start out giving us a little bit of a game plan for today's session. So we will start out, we'll talk about some of the theoretical perspectives, and we really want to balance that out with some practical approaches that can help us foster success and resilience among our students. So we will talk a little bit more in depth about how we can cultivate a sense of belonging within the academic settings that we work in and that our students are learning in. From there, we also want to consider some approaches that so we can help our students navigate our educational landscapes, especially understanding that the feeling of belonging is not always guaranteed. And so how do we help our students become part of our community? And you'll see sprinkled throughout, we have lesson strategies and some inclusive practices that we hope will give you some concrete takeaways that you can utilize when you're working with students and teaching classes at your institution. So we wanted to start out with reflecting a little bit on the messaging and expectations that we often communicate to our first year students. And these may sound common from orientations to our first year experience courses. So we're often telling our students, get involved. You can find students who have similar interests by joining clubs and organizations. Utilize all the wonderful services that campuses have to support your success. Office hours are so important for you to get to know your professors, and asking for help is a good thing. We encourage them to step outside their comfort zones and try new things and attend campus events and activities, whether those are in the residence halls or sporting events, intramurals. So all of these things are fantastic, and they are great pieces of advice for us to give to our students. But we also, as Lori and I were preparing for this, we were talking about how much of the onus we are putting on our students to get involved and to cultivate their sense of belonging. And so while these are all great tips and strategies for our students, we would argue that it's not enough.
Yeah, I was thinking about when we were processing this and preparing for it, like how striking it is when you really sort of sit back and reflect and say, we are really giving students, telling them what to do, to be active agents. And we want them to have responsibility, but as we were thinking about it, I'm saying we put so much responsibility on the students. So Stephanie and I had a lot of conversations about, through the years, and particularly when we were preparing for this, like, what can we do to help cultivate that sense of belongingness and acceptance for students? So I'm excited to kind of think about and reflect on that tension.
Yeah. And for many educators or people in higher ed, Lisa Nunn and her work on belonging has given us new insights into how students feel, especially first generation college students and especially first year students. And so this is an excerpt from Nunn's book on belonging. And I think it's important for us to think of this as well. So she says, feelings of belonging are not forged by our own hand. Instead, they are bestowed on us by the group itself. One person cannot simply decide that she is a member of a society or a social group. The group must extend such membership to her. The group must integrate and regulate her, which inspires a feeling of acceptance in her, a sense that she is valued and wanted, a sense that she belongs. Belonging must be given. It is a gift and only exists when a group collectively offers it to a member. So how are we, as members of our institution, how are we bestowing belonging? How are we bringing people into our community? And how are we intentionally doing so? So again, Lisa Nunn's College Belonging book tells us why college belonging is so essential. So she talks about the importance of social integration with peer groups. And she also talks about first generation college students having additional challenges in their sense of belonging. So with her extensive interviews and research, she found that gap between continuing generation college students and first generation college students. She also argues and has evidence that faculty and staff educators play a significant role in creating the community of belonging, right? So as faculty and staff, we can bestow that sense of belonging, and that specifically faculty are crucial to helping our first generation students feel that they're part of the community, that they're recognized, that they're really seen, and that they are supported. So others have done research on belonging recently as well. And the research does show that students' correlation between a higher sense of belonging and higher academic self-confidence and achievement. And we also know that students who do not continue with their degree also report a lower sense of belonging. So when we're talking about retention and persistence, belonging is a really important piece of that equation. And so we wanted to take just a little time to talk about some of the theories that inform the idea of faculty and staff cultivating a sense of belonging. And so we'll sort of frame these with some practical strategies as well. So many of you may be familiar with the work of Laura Randone. She has developed the validation theory, and you can see she began writing and studying this about 30 years ago, right? So this is something that has been talked about and researched. We know that students who feel validated, who are feeling like they have connections with people in the classroom and outside the classroom, are more likely to be able to be successful. So Randone's validation theory is that an enabling, confirming, and supportive process initiated by in and out of class agents, that can develop academic and interpersonal skills and provide students with exactly what they need. And we'll see some of this reflected back in belonging research as well. So we know that new college students need to build self-confidence and self-efficacy, and so a sense of agency. We know that for students with lower confidence or lack of previous experience in higher education, that this validation is especially crucial, and that this validation happening proactively, not only when there is a problem, but right from the start with our students, that this can create success and retention with our students. And so I will pass it over to Lori. She's going to talk a little bit about some additional theories that inform our conversation today.
So I wanted to talk about Carl Rogers and his phenomenological approach, because really he was one of the schools of psychology that really framed this idea of self-concept for us. And, you know, he was one of the people that kind of stepped up and said, we really need to think of individuals as healthy beings, and that everybody has this natural propensity to grow and thrive. And before him kind of putting that out there and arguing that, I think a lot of times we kind of focused on that deficit model, or that medical model of, okay, students have these particular challenges, and how are we going to diagnose and treat those particular challenges? So he came along, and really, I would say he was a precursor to that asset model that we've been talking about in the recent past, related to helping our students thrive during their college experience. And really, I would say that he was one of the people who was one of the founding fathers of the sort of positive psychology movement. So, you know, he would argue that the core of the person is essentially positive. And so that how can we kind of leverage students' strengths and move from that asset model to help them transition into the college environment? And really this idea that we have to think about what the student's experience is. And I think in student development literature, you would hear it framed as meeting the students where they're at, how they should be understood in terms of themselves and what they're bringing to their college experience before we get the opportunity to work with them, so that individuals drive for growth and success, but then really also to kind of think about what conditions might interfere with a student's growth and success. And I've often, when I've worked with colleges and universities, asked them to think about, are there institutional barriers to students' success? So it's not only what the students' abilities, predispositions, habits, attitudes, behaviors, and mindsets are, but what kind of environmental conditions do we create that can really foster a student's ability to achieve and be successful? But do we have institutional barriers in our academic policies, for example? So really important to think about. And how we as a faculty member, a staff member, a first-year experience instructor can really help students do some anticipatory problem solving and think about what might get in the way of their success, and sort of approach it like a therapeutic process. How can we help remove those obstacles? So we're going to dig into two key concepts of Rogers' definition of self-concept, and then his idea of the phenomenal field. I think I might have to rely on your magic, Stephanie. Thank you.
Sounds good.
So Roger's definition of self-concept is an organized, consistent patterns of experience and perceptions. So if we think of the components of self-concept, it's the self-image of how students see themselves, right? The extent to which they believe they can be successful, their self-esteem, how much value they place on themselves, and the extent to which they feel like they're worthy of this college experience and their abilities to be able to know and do. And that ideal self, the person that they aspire to be, like, I am a Dean's List student. I aspire to make the Dean's List. So in my early work, I really started reflecting on this idea of self-concept in general, but then this idea of students have an academic self-concept, and they might feel like they're a wonderful sibling, a wonderful daughter or son, but how do they feel about their studentship, or how they might answer the question of, I am a good student. So those are the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes that affect students in terms of their identity as a student, and that would be the definition of self-concept, right? I'm smart enough to be here. I'm worthy of my professor's time and attention. And I will become a college graduate. So the idea of self-concept is how, if you think of a student saying, I am, and fill in the blank, how they would fill in the blank when they say, I am. So Rogers also talked about this idea of congruence. So, and he talks about this idea that there's sometimes a discrepancy between the person and their experience. So I want to share an anecdote. In my career, I've worked with a lot of students who maybe ended up on warning or probation, or didn't have the positive outcomes that they had hoped for in their first test or after they completed that first semester. And so how we identify ourselves, I am poor at math. Rogers would argue that if a student defines themselves as poor as math, they would act that way, right? So I can remember having a student who came into my office, and she was on academic probation. And I said to her, and what I was really asking her to do was kind of reflect on her academic self-concept. I was asking her to reflect on the obstacles that might have gotten in the way of her maybe making the Dean's List that first semester, asking her to describe her experiences to me. And she took a deep breath and reflected, and she said, well, Dr. Hazard, I am lazy. So I thought, okay, where do we go from here? If that's her self-concept, I am lazy, then that means she's going to act like a lazy person would act, right? So I wanted to really get at that discrepancy between herself and her experience. And I begged the question, what would a hardworking students do, and what would hardworking student behaviors look like? So she said, oh, well, students would study. They wouldn't wait until the last minute before going to the tutoring center. They would go to their professor's office hours. So she very clearly knew the behaviors that should be enacted to fill in that blank of, I am a strong student. But she was identifying herself as lazy. So the work there, right, is trying to help the student close in the gap between their self and their experience, and help them get to that congruence. So Rogers talked about this idea of a phenomenal field. So in my work with students, I really want to know, what is it that's in their phenomenal field, right? I want to know and understand this student in terms of how they think about themselves and how they feel about themselves. And Rogers would argue that the most important determinants of our behavior are what's in that phenomenal field. So if we say, I am lazy, we're going to act in a lazy way, for example. And really, I think the work with us when we're working one-on-one with students is to get the students to be able to articulate some of those feelings that they have about their experience as a student, how they make sense of their experience of this of studentship and academic self-concept, and what stories they would tell. And really listening for those potential barriers to growth and development. So it has to do with their self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy is that can-do attitude, the belief that you can enact a behavior and have success in enacting that behavior, and really thinking about, if there are barriers in our phenomenal field, do they come from the inside, those self-esteem feelings, or do they come from external factors like they still have responsibilities at home to be helping with their families. And again, those thoughts and feelings and their worldview. So really important for us as educators, first year experience instructors, faculty members, and staff to do that active listening with students so we can get a sense of what's in their phenomenal field. So our goal with first year students, right, is to create that community of belonging and learning. And I think back on that quote that Stephanie read and how powerful that is, and really certainly makes me reflect on institutions that I've worked at, and what have I done to help cultivate that sense of belongingness and acceptance for students, and what time have I really taken to understand their phenomenal fields. So I think if we can talk to our students about how their academic self-concept does really mediate their relationship with their new community and how it might impact the academic experience, and take that psychoeducational approach and teach them about these psychological constructs, I think it will help them more deeply reflect on how their thoughts, feelings, attitudes, behaviors, the internal and external, will either support or prohibit them from doing well during that first year. And again, to help students doing anticipatory problem solving. So I have a student in my class this term who so astutely came up to me at the beginning of the term, and he said, listen, I need to let you know that my mother's in healthcare and she works a lot of odd hours, and I'm a commuter. And there might be times where I'm going to be late for class because I have to get my younger sibling off of the bus. So he was really articulating a potential external barrier to him being able to be at the class on time and to be engaged and alert and to be there. And I appreciated that he was aware of that external barrier. So the two of us did some anticipatory problem solving together to kind of figure out, okay, how am I going to be able to support you through this potential barrier that you have? And Rogers would really talk about that being with the student. So being with is, that way of that unconditional positive regard. Like, I understand life happens, life gets in the way. And I've been there too, right? And I can empathize with that. So as an instructor, I'm going to work with you to see if you have some of those potential barriers, how we can create a space for growth, and I can help you remove some of those obstacles. And this idea of being with was very clearly articulated in some of the research of what students want and need in order to help them feel like they belong. And I just, I love this like little laundry list here. Like, it's important to me that a faculty member knows my name and refers to me by name, because that demonstrates that empathy, right? Um, in the classroom, if faculty give students the opportunity to be successful, and when we see a student doing something in our classes that is moving them towards success and competency, that we take the time to give that reflective feedback and mention it, right? In our curriculum, we make sure that we're aware of when we're delivering our lectures or delivering our lesson plans, are we speaking to the whole group of diverse students in our classes, right? And letting them know that we are really here to be with them and be partners in their learning, and really say, I know I have confidence that you can do this. You may feel a little bit trepidatious and insecure right now, but I know with the unconditional positive regard and support that I can give you, you can do this. I'm going to help you, and I'm going to be with you, and we're in this together. So really, it's about the importance of cultivating those relationships. And again, I think it's that two-way street, right? That we encourage students to be proactive, to claim their education, to be active agents, but also understanding what we can do to sort of meet them halfway, right? So here are some of the strategies that Stephanie, you're going to talk a little bit about these strategies of how we can ensure that we're building those mutually exclusive relationships.
Yes, so I was at at the First Year Experience Conference last month, 2 months ago, and I was at a session where they were talking about having mentors assigned, so faculty and staff mentors assigned to first year students in a specific cohort. And these mentors would reach out on a regular basis, sometimes to share, hey, there's an important event coming up, or be aware that you need to register for classes. But sometimes it would also just be as simple as saying, like, hope you're having a great week, or happy hamburger day at the dining hall. So it's really simple things. And when they looked at the research between the treatment group, the cohort that had that individual outreach, and the ones who didn't, the students who were in the cohort had a much higher persistence rate. And what was especially interesting was there was no correlation between the communication being two-way or just one way. So some students never even responded to the email or messages that they were getting. Some did, some didn't, but those messages still had an impact on the students, which seemed really interesting. And I'm sure there's lots of other good research, especially in this area when we're thinking about different ways that we can connect with students. Do they even check their email anymore? Those types of things. There's some evidence showing that the outreach that we do, even if it's not reciprocated, does have some power.
Okay, so when we think about another theoretical framework that might help us inform the sense of belongingness and acceptance, we think of reciprocal determinism, that there's an interaction between the behavior and the environment. So we think of the behavior and internal personal factors of the student, and then the environmental influence of the institution. And I often think of this experience a number of years ago where I had a tutor who tutored in my academic support center, and she came to the institution, and she was a swimmer. And at our institution, there was no opportunity for students to join a swim team, but there was a pool at the institution. So she decided that she wanted to start a swim club. So as an individual, she had power over the environment in terms of going to student activities and student engagement and saying, hey, gee, I'm really interested in starting up a swim club. And she interacted with the environment, right, to create this new opportunity for students on campus. And the institution supported her with giving some fundings to start up a swim club. And 4 years later, we had a varsity swim team on this campus because of this student's personal internal factors and her determination and the environmental influences of support. So when we talk about a reciprocal determinism, we want to understand that based on personality types, for example, students will choose different environments, and our personalities kind of interpret and kind of give us reflective feedback about how we respond to events, right? So we always want to keep in mind the person environment interaction and how that mediates a student's ability to be proactive about their sense of belongingness and acceptance, and how we can help with those environmental and institutional factors. So this is an exercise that I do in my first year experience class in the spirit of helping students do anticipatory problem solving, in the spirit of really getting to think about what are all of the things in their phenomenal field that are going to mediate their college experience, influence their college experience, support their college experience, detract from their college experience. So I teach the students the concept of reciprocal determinism, and then I have them reflect on, okay, you are beginning your first year experience journey, and there may be some factors that might create roadblocks or barriers or get in the way of your success. So let's think about, where are those barriers coming from? Are they coming from you, the individual, or are they coming from the external environment? So I might have them reflect on, if they're traditional age students, for example, their friends and peer pressure. Is their roommate really supporting their ability to do well? Or is their roommate sabotaging their ability to do well by having parties in the residence hall or in their rooms constantly? Is the student not doing well in a class because of that low self-confidence or low self-efficacy? I'm really bad at math, or those negative attitudes. So I have them, sometimes I'll do a pair and share. Sometimes I'll have them get into small groups and discuss, pick 3 things from the internal and 3 things from the external that you might anticipate might get in the way of your ability to do well this semester. And then we'll share it out with the larger group. And it does enable them to do that anticipatory problem solving, because if they say, okay, I'm really concerned about my lack of knowledge or know-how with biology, then we might brainstorm solutions to that, right? Well, we have faculty office hours and we have a tutoring center. So it really creates a good springboard for discussion for students to get to know their phenomenal fields, to do that anticipatory problem solving, and for us to help mobilize resources that can respond to some of the barriers that they might anticipate. This is another strategy that I've used at an institution that Stephanie and I worked with. It's called a university pledge. And I love it because it really shows the students that we at the institution have a responsibility, right, to support and uphold their ability to do successful academically, but the students also have a responsibility to be active agents, to claim their education and to engage and do. And I think this is such a nice representation of reciprocal determinism. So one of the things that we did in a first year experience program that Stephanie and I worked in is at the very beginning, we would have the students read and reflect on the university pledge. And then we would have at convocation, for example, we would have a university official sort of embody the institution and sign the university pledge, and then the students would sign the university pledge. So I just want to pick out one or two items from the university pledge. So let's look at number 5, that the university will demonstrate the value of giving back to the this is so small here. Demonstrate the value of giving back to the greater community by offering you the opportunity to become involved in the community and campus resources. And the student will commit themselves to serve the university and the greater community through community services and be getting involved and respecting each member of the community. So it's this, again, meeting the students where they're at and showing them that we both have a responsibility to help the students thrive and be successful in that campus community. And a nice representation of the concept of reciprocal determinism. So in that book, Cultivating the Habits of Mind for Student Success that Meg mentioned, and in the chapter, Developing Academic Self-Concept, Stephanie and I really thought about who are the stakeholders that are surrounding the student, right? Supporting the student. Who are the stakeholders in the campus community? And where is that mutual interaction effect going to be with the reciprocal determinism, right? So professors have an opportunity to invite students into the community and to help cultivate that belongingness and acceptance. Peers can mediate a student's ability to be successful. Are they going to sabotage a student's ability to be successful, or are they going to support their peers? Family and culture. How does the online environment influence a student's academic self-concept, and what can we do in the classroom? So we take this framework and we talk to the students in terms of, think about how you're relating to this new environment and how are you as an individual going to adjust to this new environment so that you can be successful. So we want to support students to develop that academic self-concept by fostering behavior change and mindset change, but we want to support them to do that.
So we thought we would just take a little time to share a few examples of class activities, and these are easily also adapted to online courses or even homework assignments. But these dive in a little bit more deeply to academic self-concept and the different factors on the wheel that Lori was just discussing. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly, so you'll have a sense of the goals and what we're aiming for here. And we hope that these are helpful to you if you'd like to adapt them in any way. So this first activity explores the influence of family on academic self-concept, right? So we're asking students to reflect on how family influences their views on success and education. We can have them write about how their family may have shaped their approach to college. So if we think about some students may come from a family where there was a lot of pressure to go to college. Other students may be the first in their family and having difficulty helping their families understand the demands that are on them, how much time it takes for them to be in college and how different college may be from high school. So we can have students discuss how the dynamics affect their academic behavior. And then we can also give them an opportunity to create an action plan that will help them sort of anticipate the challenges and then balance their family expectations with their own goals. So we would hope that this would foster their self-awareness a little bit and help them think more deeply about their academic self-concept when it comes to their family relationships. So, and then this activity has students explore their self-concept online. And so it encourages students to reflect on their online engagement and analyze one of their social media profiles, and to put themselves in the shoes of different various audiences, to consider how that online presence might come through to or be perceived by different constituents or different people who may be looking at their profile. So they students can have a chance to reflect on some potential concerns, like, was that photo exactly something that I would want a potential recruiter to see, right? And they can, the action item for this assignment might be to identify a few changes that they'd like to make to their profiles. So we hope that this would encourage them to think a little bit more critically about their social media profile and about how their online engagement may or may not be aligning with their academic self-concept and their future goals. And then we'd also like them to think a little bit more about their relationships with their peers. So this activity gives them a chance to reflect on that. So it would give them the opportunity to consider whether the relationships that they have right now that they're starting to build, especially in their first semester and first year, if those are supporting their goals or if they're hindering them in any way. And then on the other side, are they supporting the goals of their friends and the people that they care about? So this, as with many of these activities, this gives students a chance to work in groups and to think through what's important to them and to prioritize. And we also, in many of these exercises, we give students a chance to look at case studies, right? So writing up little examples of common scenarios that students may experience and having students apply what they're learning in the classroom to these generic experiences to so that they can think a little bit more deeply and then engage in conversation with their classmates.
I often use humor with that one because I say to students, it's no mistake that the probation students are sitting together in the cafeteria, right? Why do students recruit other students to procrastinate with them, right? Because they all want to go down the rabbit hole together. So I really want students to think about, am I engaging in a healthy relationship, right? Is this person sabotaging my ability to do well and asking me to go play Xbox for 4 hours when I have a test the next day? Or is this person saying, hey, let's go to the math lab together? So really getting students to think about who they're hitching their wagons to, and if the person is uplifting their ability to do well, or is the student dragging them down?
Yeah. So the last quick activity we wanted to touch on at this point is to spending some time to demystify office hours for students. So they may have been hearing about office hours, don't entirely understand what that means. And we know, especially for first generation college students, this can feel especially intimidating. They know they're supposed to go to office hours, but what happens there after they get there? So taking some time as part of a class activity for faculty to lay out their own personal preferences for office hours, have students think about reasons why they might visit, and we can even share some possible conversation starters so they have like a little mini script that they can take with them if they're meeting with you, if you're one of their faculty members, or if they're going to meet with a different faculty member for one of their other classes. So Lisa Nunn has some really great conversation starters in her text as well. So it's something, if you're interested, you can look into a little bit further. And this could be a good opportunity to do some role playing with students where they get in pairs and one can be the faculty member and one can be the student, and they can do a little low stakes practicing so that office hours are a little bit more accessible to them and they feel more comfortable taking advantage. I'll turn it back to you, Lori.
Okay, so we just want to reflect on, and there are many more than these, but we want to consider some other potential barriers to belonging and acceptance. And in the spirit of reciprocal determinism, looking at something that comes from the internal and then something that comes from the external. So there's been a lot of research done with imposter syndrome. This term was first introduced by Peggy McIntosh at Wellesley College. And she talked about how many times people feel like, that sense of worthiness, like, do I really belong here? And imposter syndrome has been correlated with lower self-efficacy, which can mediate the extent to which people are willing to be engaged. And I think we can all reflect that maybe we've had an experience with imposter syndrome. In fact, at the beginning of this webinar, I was like, who's Meg talking about? I had that moment of imposter syndrome when she was reading the old bio. I'm like, what qualifies me to be sitting here? I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I've been in this field for 30 years. So if many of us who have accomplished things can have those smacks of imposter syndrome, you can imagine how it's a powerful mediator for belongingness with first-year students and first-generation students in particular. And then if we think of the hidden curriculum, that sometimes we're not as explicit as we could be about explaining things to students. And I can even think of vocabulary that we might use. We might tell a student to go to the bursar's office, right? And they don't know what that means. They don't know that that's where they take care of their bills or their finances. So I think for many of us who are experts, for example, in the vocabulary of colleges and universities, if we can really think about how a novice might enter into that community, and think about how we might really spell out what office hours for, as that exercise that Stephanie shared with you shows, and that we can really give students that step-by-step access to getting them to do the things that we need them to do to encourage their academic achievement and be successful. So this is a common phenomenon, that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt. So again, in terms of kind of calling out what's in students' phenomenal fields and actively listening to them, if they say things that make you think, gee, I think that person might be feeling some of the symptoms, if you will, of imposter syndrome, how can we encourage and build that academic self-concept and that self-efficacy? And I think one of the things that we can do is take that psychoeducational approach, talk to them about imposter syndrome, norm it for them, share that we've had feelings of imposter syndrome, and that everybody feels that way to a certain extent. So, you're in good company if you have had those feelings at one time or another.
I think about how in the tutoring center, sometimes students will come in and they'll tell me how much they're struggling and they feel embarrassed or they feel like that something's really wrong. And when I say, this is a really common experience, right? There's a lot of students who are in the same situation as you. They often do really look surprised. And so getting that information of like, oh, this is normal. It doesn't mean I'm not meant to be here. It just means I need to make some changes or meet with a tutor or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it definitely gives them grace and a sense of release. A relief, I think. So, this is, I in my first year experience class, I might share this quote with students and we kind of deconstruct it. I'm definitely afraid that people are going to find out maybe I'm not as prepared, right? So then there's that student questioning their level of preparedness and their self-efficacy. Maybe I don't always know the answers. People are like, I'm going to be found out, right? People are going to see if I ask for help that I'm weak. So then there's this sense of that ability to ask for help, and is it okay to do that? And in this student self-concept, she equates the ability to ask for help with weakness. And, of course, we want to reframe that for students and say, no, asking for help is really a marker of courage, not a marker of weakness. We're all bright students. So I kind of look at that and I say, oh, there's some opportunity there to think about mindset, right? So she's thinking about her, maybe her traditional IQ there. I'm bright. We're all here for a reason and needing help on something, or maybe not the first time. So you can kind of see the struggle of her processing this and sorting it out. But truly, absolutely needing help and being afraid of getting a failing grade was really hard for me to admit to myself. I'm still working through that. So I think it goes again back to that grace, right? And knowing that this developmental phase during the first semester takes time for students to process, and are being with the student to support them through that those opportunities for growth. I love sharing this with students too. If you got the old Saturday Night Live fans out there, Mike Myers, who was clearly very successful. And I just love that he says, I still believe that at any time the no talent police are going to come and arrest me. And I had a moment like for 10 seconds that I thought I was going to get the hook off of the webinar before we started today. So again, this imposter syndrome, it's real. I think for first year students, it's exacerbated because they're in such a new environment, and there's so much that we can do to help norm this experience for students. And so again, I think the hidden curriculum is what we can really help students understand and maybe articulate the utilization of campus resources. Why do we have so many campus resources? And be clear with students that one of the things that campus resources can do for students is it really can help them cultivate skills that they're going to be able to apply when they go off on their careers, right? Campus resources can help with problem solving skills, organizational skills. So I think if a student takes the lead on organizing an event on campus, right, they'll learn pretty good time management and logistical skills from that. Office hours are really designed, professors are eager to work with students, and they want to help students with the content of their coursework, because I'm a psychology professor and I'm passionate about that. And how class participation can really enable them to process the information that they're learning, collaborate with their classmates, and show what you know to your professor, that you're really thinking about what you're learning and reading. So really to make those the explicit, the implicit explicit, and really to get students to understand not the hidden curriculum, but the overt curriculum, and help them understand those college expectations. So, I am a big fan of taking a psychoeducational approach, teaching students these psychological constructs, and really helping them to think about the ability to ask for help and developing those self-advocacy skills. And this was particularly striking for me post-COVID. Stephanie and I were working together, and she said, Lori, I just can't understand students aren't utilizing the tutoring and writing center in the same way. And we started thinking, they don't know how to ask for help. We need to teach them how to do that. We want to make that hidden curriculum explicit and share our own experience. And then the other thing that we can really do is normalize failure for students. It's going to happen, and that's okay.
So we have a couple of activities or ideas for sets of activities that get at some of these areas. So the first one, as Lori's been talking about, asking for help in self-advocacy, knowing how and when to advocate for oneself. So often when I am talking with groups of students, I will tell them that asking for help is the most important skill that they can learn in their first weeks or months of their semester. And I also have them try to brainstorm all the different times when they may need to ask for help, not just in college, but as they move on with their professional lives as well. So I talk to them about how asking for help is a lifelong skill, that if they don't feel like they're confident with it now, that they can get some practice while they're in college. So we can give them different scenarios and help them think about who and where they can go on campus to get support for different challenges like academic support, mental or emotional support. So you see some examples there. And we can also help them think about self-advocacy as having some really concrete steps they can take. So we can kind of give them this framework, and Lori has developed something called the 4 C's of self-advocacy, and you'll see it there. So courage, clarify, communication, and confidence. So if we teach them this little framework, we can have them practice it or think it through a few times in class, either in pairs, in groups, or even individually, and then have them think about how they might utilize it the next time that they need to ask for help in a situation that they can picture themselves being in. And back to the idea about normalizing failure, I think we can talk about failure as part of the learning process, right? So we know that all the greatest inventions were invented because people failed probably dozens, if not hundreds of times in search of the solution and of success. So if we can normalize failure and have students apply another great framework, the 5 A's framework, where they can consider accepting the failure. So if they have an experience, first accepting and possibly adjusting their expectations or adjusting how they thought this through, assessing where they went wrong, asking for help, and then activating a plan so they can try for success the next time. So if we give students, again, some really concrete ways to approach asking for help, and then how to handle failure, we can also help build that resilience and help them feel that they're not a failure because they had a failure, right?
So this idea of cultivating a sense of belongingness is a reciprocal relationship between the student and the institution. And I think what we can do as faculty, staff, and first-year experience instructors is we can really think very concretely about how do we extend group membership to students in the classroom, on our campuses, with our co-curricular activities. And the step to doing that is really being with the students and creating that trust and being able to articulate to them why it's a worthwhile endeavor to get themselves engaged and involved in our campus communities. I'm a big fan of taking that psychology of learning and that psychoeducational approach and teaching the students some of those basic constructs, and then how they can apply it to their real life experience of being a first year student. And really, I think this is all about cultivating particular habits of mind that will lead to college success that I feel like through my research and my 30 years of practice working in the classroom with students and one-on-one with students, I've seen some pretty clear patterns. I would argue that the first thing that we can do for students is to help them cultivate that ability to ask for help. And I think the first step is courage, right? To really tell them that it's a marker of courage to ask for help. And then I say clarity because sometimes students don't even know what they need to ask for help for. They're not clear on why they're struggling. So we can really help them gain clarity on that and be able to articulate how they ask for help by doing some role playing with their communication skills, right? And while we're doing that, we're really building their confidence and their self-efficacy. And our students need to know that this is not easy, right? They have to have the willingness to take risk and go to that professor's office hours and walk through the door, which is not easy. We understand that. And we want them to be able to practice healthy relationships and get in the habit of having healthy habits. And a healthy habit is asking for help. And really, this is about them developing their emotional intelligence, right? Those intrapersonal skills, that ability to reflect and develop that deeper self-awareness so that they can enact the behaviors and we can support them to do that. These are the 10 habits of mine, if you ask me, from my research and practice that really can help students claim their education and be successful in college. But the ones in particular that are related to this sense of belongingness and acceptance is that ability to ask for help, the willingness to change and take risks, to be really reflective about forming healthy relationships and healthy habits. And many times for students, I'll personify the institution and I'll say, we know that healthy relationships involve intimacy, and an intimate relationship involves a lot of hard work. So you want to make friends with your institution, right? Because if when you're a senior, you want to ask for that letter of recommendation from your career services office, that means you would have had to cultivate a relationship with somebody who works in the career services office. Or if you want to ask a faculty member for a letter of recommendation, you really want to have an intimate relationship with your institution. And you do that through hard work and effort. But in order to enact those behaviors, students really have to have a deep sense of self-awareness and know if imposter syndrome is getting in their way, or if they tend to be introverted, might that be getting in the way? Or if they ascribe a particular value, a negative value to asking for help. So this is really about helping the students develop those emotional quotient skills, those interpersonal skills, and getting them to have that deeper sense of self-awareness. So bringing it home here. So Stephanie and I are excited because these ideas from our research and practice have been, I'm not going to say distilled. Well, maybe I don't know how to frame it, but these ideas are in our habits of mind for success in college. And we did call it Claiming Your Education because we want students to understand that they're active agents. But like I said, as we've been deeply reflecting, we also understand that it is a reciprocal deterministic relationship that the institution really needs to help support students to develop these habits of mind as well.
All right. So, Megan, are there some questions we should address?
Well, first of all, thank you both so much for that wonderful presentation. I really love the approach of addressing like those self-efficacy factors and imposter syndrome, because I feel like when you're giving someone steps and tools, you can really kind of like tell like, okay, is this even sinking in? Like, is this something that they feel like, oh yeah, I could do that? Or are there kind of like some prerequisites before we can even get to that point? So a question I'd love to kick it off with is, say I'm a student. This is like a worst case scenario question. I'm a student, I'm walking into your office and I'm saying, I really, really think that this isn't working out. I need to drop out of school. I don't feel like I really belong here. Just wanted to let you know before I say goodbye. What is your response to that?
Mm.
I would want to gather information, and we'll use the term from the talk is, I would really want to know a little bit more about what's going on in their phenomenal field. And I would want to ask them, you just gave a lot to unpack, right? You know, I want to know if they're on their way to the registrar's office to fill out the withdrawal form, right? Are they at that part of the process, or are they catastrophizing, right? And I take into consideration student development, and if that's an 18-year-old student, right, where we know that adolescents tend to catastrophize, and then 2 hours later they're okay because they're trying to manage all of those emotions. That's different than an adult student who's coming in and saying that, right? So really getting at what's in the phenomenal field, right? And finding out, is this person just catastrophizing, or what concrete things might have happened that led to this disclosure.
And I think the one thing I would add on, if there seemed to be a little glimmer that perhaps they were open, then I would start to hopefully be able to find the small positives that they may have experienced up to that point, and then find a way to help them expand that. So maybe they say, oh, I was thinking about going to that meeting, like maybe helping them so that they feel like they really can walk in the door of that meeting for the first time, or have them sort of figure out a way to connect with the things that might make it feel more fulfilling to stay.
Megan, you reminded me of a case of a student who came into my office, and she said, I'm done, Dr. Hazard. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I am so homesick. I miss my mother. I'm used to talking to her every single day. I am not going to be able to manage through this. I really just want to go home. And now we're in Rhode Island. And I said, well, where do you live? And she said, Connecticut. So I thought, okay, that's a glimmer, because she said California, I would have had trouble implementing the strategy. But I said to her, I'm like, okay, I could tell that student was in such distress that she needed a touchstone to go home. So we did a little calendar therapy, and we looked at her calendar, and I said, how long do you think you can stay before you really, really need that touchstone home? And she said, I don't know, I think about 2 weeks. So we planned for her to go home for 2 weeks. And we did like this bridging of she surviving every 2 weeks until we got her to the Thanksgiving break, right? So it's really finding out, again, really digging and figuring out what's going on, and then thinking of some concrete strategies that we can help students with.
I love that.
Oh,
I
look.
also love the phrase, oh, sorry, I also love the phrase calendar therapy.
Oh, yeah, I think that helps
For
with
sure.
students, because I also they're so like, oh, everything in their calendar is so negative, like all the assignments and things. So I also help them build in like little rewards. I'm going to go to the movies with my friend on Friday night, or I'm going to go out for coffee with this one, so they can see the fun things in their calendar with their um the work that they have to do, balancing that work and fun. I
Mhm.
see Linda has a question. How can we help students refocus when mentally tired and overwhelmed? Oh boy.
Mm,
Um, I do really think that time and behavior management stuff can foster creating situations where students can build in time to relax. And I think for students, that's a new phenomenon. Wait, I'm going to schedule my fun in. I'm going to schedule my recharging in. So for a student like that, I would really probably help them look at their week, see what demands are on them, and then see if we can find some pockets of time that we can figure out what helps them recharge, right? And build that into their schedule and encourage them to take care of themselves. Although I have a student in my class this term who has literally is working, has 7 kids, and is going to school, and she's in time poverty. So Linda, if
mhm.
students are in time poverty, that's such a huge challenge, right? To help them figure out pockets of time where they can recharge. And I always like that overwhelmed one day at a time, asking students to ask themselves, what do I need to do today to get through
Mhm.
tomorrow? Because if they're at that overwhelm on the edge point, that's the first step. What do you need to do today to get through tomorrow? And let's get you through tomorrow, and then do it again.
Yeah, that's great. Um, so now you guys do a lot of these different kinds of talks and have done a lot of research into belonging and things like that. And there is no first year experience instructor who sets the intention, I'm going to teach this class, but I really don't want my students to feel like they belong. So all of this comes from kind of like blind spots, right? Like you said, it's that hidden curriculum. Where do you feel like some of those blind spots really kind of come in? You addressed a lot of them in the talk, but just from your conversations with instructors, what are some of
Mm.
your most common ones that you find?
I feel like for me, um, sometimes it's faculty find that they had no idea about all the things going on in the background for a student. And sometimes, especially if we've been teaching for a long time, we may fall into making assumptions because we've had so many classes and, we know how a typical class might go. But I had a very wise person that I worked with for a long time. And she always said, you never know what's going on with the student. You never know why that behavior that you see is happening until you really talk to them. And that I think it's hard, right? Because sometimes it's not possible to talk to every student, but really, I think trying to make time to do that when possible, and also make space to think, okay, is this student may be missing class? Is it because, and sometimes we might think, oh, it's because they don't care about this class. They don't see it as valuable, but is there something else going on, and trying to really look with that open mind.
And it is that like empathy piece with Rogers, right? That you want to get into
Mhm.
like experience what's going on with the students from their point of view. And we always did this as a training at my institution on the, like, to kick off the academic year, is to situate yourselves in the mind of a first year student and what might be going on with them. Because I think as we move further and further away from having had that experience, you tend to forget what it was like to have those feelings of inadequacy or being nervous. And so really, I think it's just right about helping people build empathy for students, and to understand that, like Stephanie said, life happens and there are so many things that are going on with them. And if we're empathetic to the life happens and all of the stuff, then we put ourselves in a better position to support them.
Yeah, I love that. Well, do we have any final questions today? All right. Well, thank you again, Lori and Stephanie, so much for the wonderful, wonderful presentation today. Carrie said she really appreciates that. We got that note in the comment here. So does Bryson. Thank you guys. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. The recording will be coming out in a couple of days. And so thank you again, Lori and Stephanie. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
I have one comment. I can see the hearts going up.
It's so cute.
It's been a while since I've seen those. It's what you can do for your students. It's the little things.
That's right.
Oh, that's so fun. That's so fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That just made my day.
Oh, we've got party cones going up now. There we go.
Oh, yay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Right.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.